Bekki Brewer, and I am running for the District 44 state rep seat here in Boone County. I have spoken here before, so I feel like the Muleskinners are kind of part of my journey. So I talked to you a little bit about Camp Carnahan last year. And so now I have filed officially. I have had a campaign kickoff, and we're actually going to start knocking doors tomorrow. We're meeting right here in this spot tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And yeah, so we've got a group of folks. I've got a campaign manager now. My mom is my treasurer. And so we're going to have those folks and some of my family and friends, supporters showing up tomorrow. And we're just going to get out and talk to the community. I think for them, my name is well known in Hallsville, but we're trying to get it out as being an elected candidate as well. I've had to even let folks know I'm running as a Democrat, so making sure that there's lots of different ways they can tell. But and as far as really the campaign, so there are priorities to me and reasons why I'm running. And really, I would say the very first one is representation. I'm new to politics. But I understand that the role of a state rep is to represent their constituents. My current elected state rep is not doing a good job of representing his constituents, representing us, which is how I got here in the first place, right? Sorry, my phone is ringing. I'm gonna make that stop. And so that's really one of the first things that we're talking with folks about is whether you are checking the R box or the D box, when we vote, our vote matters. When the majority of us vote for something, our elected officials should not come back through because they disagree with it and try and take those votes or our voices, try to silence us, right? And there's lots of that happening with gerrymandering and initiative petition process. So we're talking to folks about representation and not control. Missouri has been under control of Republican folks, and really here recently we're seeing this really ultra conservative push, right? So my current elected official is very ultra conservative, and that is what he is trying to promote for all of Missouri, including our district. And I know, and you guys I'm sure know, that the majority of folks in Missouri, in Boone County, and in my district voted for progressive measures like abortion access, paid sick leave. Like, we are voting for progressive measures. Now we have to make sure that we're voting for progressive candidates. And again, some of that discussion that we're having is, being a small town person myself, I used to vote Republican. I used to check the R box because that's what my neighbors did. That's what I thought I was supposed to do. And I just didn't know enough, right? I just wasn't educated enough. And so luckily, folks like my father were determined to let me understand some of the things. Barack Obama, and I've shared this before, was the first Democratic president I voted for. And I remember even back in the primaries, my dad was like, this guy, and I'm going, oh, Chicago, he's going to take our guns. You know, how's he going to relate to this small town girl like myself? Super wrong. Right? I mean, he's fantastic. If we're talking about third term presidents, I'm going to sign him up. Right? But I had to learn. I didn't know. And then experiences with other representatives that I've had that were from my small town. And I thought they were good people. And holy cow, they were not. They were concerned about litter boxes in our schools and just a bunch of things that don't help the people that live in my district. Just focus on a bunch of other things that don't help the majority of us. So, we're talking to folks about the representation piece. Other things that are really important to me would be like our public schools. So I live in Hallsville. I grew up in there. I still have a son that goes to Hallsville. We're a public school family. I have grandkids that are attending public school here in Columbia. Missouri, we are last or almost last to funding our schools, paying our teachers. We are now pushing back, like we can't trust our teachers. It is important to me that we fully fund our schools, that we pay our teachers what they deserve. And again, in places like Hallsville, that's the biggest employer in my town is the public school. And we're already on a 4-day week because we were having trouble retaining good teachers. Ashland is talking about 4-day weeks, and they voted to hold off on a decision last year, but they're in that same, these small towns, right? And part of that is funding that's being taken away from them or diverted, but also school vouchers. School vouchers take public funds away from public schools, and I feel like, especially in some of the rural parts where I'm at, maybe we don't necessarily understand that is your kid's not going to go, maybe, right? I love my kid being in Hallsville, but money's going to be taken away from my child and my community kids to go to schools that somebody's already paying to attend. So those are things that are important to me. Bodily autonomy is extremely important to me. I try to stay out of the what if weeds, what if this happens or what if this happens. I feel that it is your body, it is your choice. You and your doctor should be making your medical. I don't want to make them for you. I don't want you to come into my doctor's office and have some input. I don't want John Martin in there telling my doctor what she can and can't do for me. There are lots of issues that Republicans try to bring up and target these small minorities of groups, like trans children. Like there's ways that we can protect all kids, like having safe gun storage that protects all kids, right? But there's this idea that we want to target and bully these small amount of kids who maybe poor kids want to play volleyball in high school, right? And we're picking on those kids and not really protecting the majority of kids. And that's where we should focus on. Seeing a lot of the opposite of that in Jeff City right now and across the US. But again, trying to stay somewhat local with some of my talking points, and really affordability. So we are seeing already prices are going up. They're going up much quicker than pay, or people who are on fixed incomes that they have a certain amount of money that comes in. Everything else is going up. We are now looking at this whole income tax discussion where and as we were talking about it, it's if we take away income tax, we're basically voting for a sales tax. It's going to happen. That money has to come from somewhere, and that impacts folks like us in this room or folks online.
Very aggressive.
Yeah. So we need people in Jeff City who are going to speak for their constituents and not just for some of those self-interests that they might have or messages that are coming down from our president. We've specifically for me, my opponent, he is a freshman, so he's just finishing his first round. But he is a strong supporter and is recently thanking God for Trump and what he has done for our country and our state. And I could not disagree more with that. As far as for me personally, I mentioned I live in Hallsville, grew up there, still have a son there who's 16. I have 3 older kiddos. I say kiddos, they're in their mid-20s. My oldest is an active duty Marine. And I will tell you that he is the first person I think of recently, especially when I pick up my phone and I read the news. He called me yesterday and it just made my chest tighten up. Just seeing his name in the middle of the day on my phone.
Yeah.
And he was calling. He's actually, his contract ends. He's doing 10 years. And he's working on a resume for civilian roles. And so he was asking me for some help because that's process, right? But those phone calls, right? As a parent of somebody and seeing what's happening in the news, like all of those are somebody's kids, whether they're soldiers for the US, whether they're, young girls at school who have died, like those are all somebody's kids. And that is my son, potentially out there making sure that he's upholding this contract that he has made with our federal government and hopefully keeping himself safe. So, and then I have 2 other kiddos that live here in Columbia. And again, one of them has turned me into a Mimi. So I have the 3 grandkiddos and 2 that are in public school. And I worry about my grandkids. I worry about my granddaughter and the things that she is going to potentially have to experience if we don't do something, right? And that all is sort of how I got here. I keep seeing things happening, and I found my voice a couple of years ago, and I started speaking up, and then it was like, well, that's not enough, right? And so I started taking action and volunteering with places like Abortion Action Missouri. I helped some with Dave Rathel's campaign. And looking back now, I could have done more for Dave. I could have donated more. I could have knocked doors more. And so as he was passing that baton on, I said, I'll do it. Like I don't know, I don't have experience, like, but I want to help. And folks like Greg Bush there and said, if you have the will, we can show you how to do that. And I actually read online just this week, there's another candidate in Cole County, same thing, is running because Greg said, if you want, we're a team, we are in this together, and we can help you. And so I had the pleasure of speaking to a gentleman out of District 43 who was interested in running as that's like Drain County. They don't have anybody as a Democrat, and he was interested in running. And so I was able to connect him, and it is just, we're seeing this, people are starting to step up. And this gentleman was nervous a year ago when I talked to him, and he's built this confidence and that he can make a difference, and he has the ability. And so it is inspiring to see the amount of people who've come forward, people in my small town who are willing to stand up and know that they are part of the majority. When I go to Hallsville and I go to the grocery store, more than 50% of the people in that store voted for progressive measures. And we're not always the loudest, but we are the majority. And so that is really what our campaign is really going to try and do is get out and talk to those folks. Stores, canvassing, events in places that we are more than welcome, and events in places that they might go, oh, a Democrat, but that's who I am. That's my community, and I'm going to do my best to try and support them and represent them in the best way that I can. And I just picked up my very first palm cards today. I went to St. Louis this morning to get these, so I'm very excited, and I do have some if you would. So,
okay. We had one comment so far on the chat. Dave Taylor, it's a question, says, your opponent does not live in your district. He's actually one of Adrian Plank's 47th district constituents. We need our voters to know this, which you decided if that's the case or not. But
yes. So I actually tried to, well, first of all, if you were to go back and look on my opponent's, let's say his Facebook page, if you went back to 2022, you would see him running as a candidate for the 47th against Adrian.
Yes.
He lost against Adrian, which Adrian told him he would, but he lost. A house was purchased in my district, and he has a house. My opponent also has a house, and public record, right? I'm not necessarily a stalker, but public record. There's a house in Rocheport. There's a house in Hallsville. Yeah. And so that house he does not live in, is my understanding, and lives in the house in Rocheport that is valued at a significantly higher amount. Again, based on what we're seeing, I can only afford one house in my one district, so not an issue that will come up for me. But I've talked to folks about writing letters to the editor. I tried to submit one recently. I have learned, because I'm learning now that I've filed, or now that I've announced I can't necessarily do letters to the editor in that way.
That's interesting. But someone else could.
Yes, so asking other people to help with that. And so my wife wrote one recently for the Centralia Guard, and said, the voters deserve to know where you live. When he speaks, it is very careful. I grew up in Centralia. I'm a lifelong Boone County resident, but you don't hear, this is, here's why I live in Hallsville. This is important to me. This is my community. I am here. You hear him and Adrian could ride together to Jeff City because they live in the same district. So, and to me, those are fundamentals. Like if we're cheating the system just to get our foot into a district that we think we can win in, That is, from a core value standpoint, like my moral compass does not point me that way. Like this is literally who I am, and I believe that is not the case for him, for sure.
Suzanne believes that she offers in the chat. His daughter lives in Huntsville House, here or there, but
yes, I have.
For what it's worth, there it is. We also have a hand raised online. Herb, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question, Ms. Brewer?
First, thank you very much. My deep thanks for your running in this challenging district for a Democrat. I'm trying to infer the strategy that you're following in trying to attract people who are habitually voting for Republicans, as you put it, because that's what their neighbors do. And for many places across the country, we see those doing quite well at this are emphasizing over and over the various aspects of the affordability crisis. And that is a theme. Your presentation implied you have a somewhat different strategy. And if that is so, I'd like to hear it.
So I think it is probably a combination of both, right? I know in my district, we have the numbers that show us that the majority of folks are voting for progressive. So we are talking to folks about when you vote for the issues that are important to you, you need to make sure that you have representatives that also support that. Because we are seeing very clearly in District 44 that that's not happening. I get a little jealous of the district reps here in Columbia, of the people maybe who live and have those reps, right? Yeah. But in my district, we voted for something, and the gentleman who's supposed to be standing up and ensuring that we are represented in that way is working to take that away from us. So that is definitely a message that we are communicating to folks in the district. But we are also talking, you mentioned the affordability piece. There's going to be a vote before too much longer about this income tax issue, which is, again, it's really a vote for a tax increase for sales tax, right? And so we are going to drive that piece in as well with the folks that we talk to understand that this is not going to get better for folks like us. They're really coming after everyday individuals like us sitting around this table, or you on the call. We're the ones that have to flip those high costs, while people who make significantly more than we do are seeing tax breaks and not having to deal with this everyday struggle that a lot of folks, especially in my district, have to face financially.
I think you answered David Littl's question, which was your view on the proposal to eliminate the income tax. If you want to say anything more about that, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, I expect my opponent will vote to get rid of that, in support of that, and I do not. I think that is a big mistake for us. We've seen how that impacts other states and the damage that it has done there, and it takes a significant amount of time to try and repair that. I think it's sort of a tease to say we're going to eliminate tax, because people hear that and they're like, "That's great! I pay so much, and look what's happening." But it's not. It's just a transfer of responsibility over to folks like us.
A couple of things. One, refreshment. It sounded like you said he will vote to eliminate that. Has that already passed the legislature?
So he's not come to a vote yet. No, but
so it'll be obvious. It's not like this. We're going to the
correct.
Ballot.
This is happening. Yep.
That'll probably be held the legislative vote before the election. Yep. So that'll be something you can handle.
Absolutely.
The other thing was more of a comment. You said you gotta let people know you're a Democrat. I would think. It's just a personal thing. The important thing is to hammer the difference between you and him and say, oh, he's the Republican person, so I couldn't run against him as a Republican. I have to, that's the only way I can run against him. That way it might keep from turning off some of the people in your district who are, I never vote for a Democrat. So keep in mind, I like your message. I think that's really important.
Some of my calls to people have, it starts very general. I'm Bekki Brewer and I'm running, and they're going, "Are you a Democrat?" Yes. Oh, good. And then they're ready to keep talking to me. So, but to your point, I have attended things, even I attended as the Democrats representing an event in Hallsville recently. I say recently, it was over a year ago, but, and I had to cover up that we weren't allowed to have this political response, which was, so I talked to a ton of people, and then they're like, well, who are you with? And I'm with the Democrats. And it was like, oh, I've been talking like you seem like, and every day, you know, your whole life, and I'll be darned, you know, so there's definitely something to be said for that, is because people can just hear one word and go try to shut you off. And again, the majority of us we're here. But we get kind of hung up on which box do we check.
Just following up on that, Yvonne Reefshop, who's the vice chair of the Rural Caucus in Missouri. I heard her say when she was running, she said she would go out, knock on doors, and talk to people, and afterwards they'd say, "Oh, I guess I really am a Democrat." Well, that's why I was a Republican. But hearing the issues and her stance on it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Her and I have talked a couple times, and yeah, she has fought some interesting battles, but she's out there talking to people. She said she would have town halls specifically just on one topic, like guns. Come and talk to me about guns, and you know, here's the baseline that we can all agree on, and then we can build from that. She's been fantastic also just as a resource from a candidate.
We've got a question from Dave Taylor. He says 5,000, he lives in Ashland, 5,000 people now live in Ashland and 9,000 voters in Southern Boone total in the 44th. Can't win without them. What is your plan to engage with and educate voters in Southern Boone? They vote like crazy down there.
Yes. So we intend to have regular events in Ashland and Hartsburg. And those are some of the places that we're going to be down door knocking. We expect to have to knock 25,000 doors, right? We have got our work cut out for us. And we're going to try to reach those folks in lots of different ways. But door knocking is one of them. We're going to reach out to them on the phone. We're going to be at their local events. We're going to be inviting them to several events that are close. This is a big district. So like I had my campaign kickoff in Hallsville, which isn't even necessarily the middle, but I got folks, it's an hour top to bottom. And so trying to schedule events that I'm going to be available for people to hear my message and for me to hear from them. That is not something that we are seeing from our Republican opponents. They are not interested in being out in and answering questions. So trying to be very transparent and open and available for folks that need us. And we are, again, trying in the different ways, newspapers and, you know, the different social medias and getting on interviews with, you know, some of the local kind of grassroots type media that can help get messages out to different types of folks.
I want to follow up on what David Mallory was talking about and say it this way. Don't be worried that you're going to alienate us if we find out that you're hanging around with rural groups that would seem to be Republicans. We know you pretty well now, and we know why you're doing what you're doing. Yvonne Chong, again, had really surprised us in that way. So be as bold as you like to find out what your constituents want and how, and let them know what you want too. Just wanted to comment. I might be overstepping a little bit, but I'm glad to see a little more gray in your hair on top, because the first time you started talking about your grandchildren, I thought, this can't be true. But really, your small town values, as you put it, it sounds really good, and we need it so much. And if you weren't thinking about your Marine son so much, you could talk more about being a grandmother and hit a lot of notes in a small town, hit a lot of notes with a lot of people. So I liked also what you're talking about, the South. Dave's right. The South is going to be important for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And they do. Ashland.
But Martin's not a Southerner either. So
no. And there are parts of the district that, it does this kind of gerrymandered business around Columbia.
Yeah.
Those parts of the district aren't getting any attention from our. Yeah. So trying to make sure that those folks are hearing and understanding that they do have somebody that would support them. Devin who works with the Boone County Democrats. I'm gonna have her help me schedule some events in Columbia too, because there are a lot of Columbia folks who feel like in my district that they're not getting that support. And so like to be able to connect with not just the towns, right? Those rural towns, but the Columbia voters too.
Well, you'll still look young, even if you have.
Question. Do you have a website and do you have a distribution list? If we sign up for news events.
So we are working on a website now. I do have right now I have a Google form. So I have a link where people can go and express interest in volunteering, or if they want to sign, or if they'd like to sign up for our email. We're going to start sending out like every 2-week newsletter to people. And so that is helping us kind of build our roster, if you will, of emails. So
is that on your Facebook
That
page?
is on my Facebook. Yep.
Anything more there? We should wrap it up soon. As much fun as we're having.
And can people make donations on that or not?
They absolutely can. So I do have an Act Blue. And so thank you for bringing that up, and for inviting me, I should say. So yeah, I do have an Act Blue. People can make donations with cash or check, but Act Blue is probably the easiest way, and that link is on my Facebook page, and it's also in that Google form if people access it that way. But I definitely have the Act Blue account for those that might be interested in supporting. I will say, it being a new person to politics, there's an incredible amount of money that goes into a campaign. I do know that my opponent, there is a PAC for him that has been created to reelect Martin. And so I've got my work cut out for me, reaching out to folks. It is a kitchen table campaign, right? It's me and my mom, right? But we've got folks who are willing to volunteer and help and spread the message, which is fantastic. We've had donations. So yeah, if anybody is interested in any of those things, we would welcome and appreciate the support.
That sounds like a good closing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
People at home, I'm going to point you at Dave again. He's going to do it. Are you going to do another introduction?
I'm only going to let them switch seats and say that we have another.
I don't know.
Oh, yes.
How you
We have another candidate with us today. She was here, I know, a couple months ago and introduced herself, but it was very, very brief. And so I will, if you can, to get started with your introduction of yourself now, and I guess you've got a little thing to show us online too.
Sure. Just that you have something to stare at other than me.
Okay.
And is this meant to be low? I feel like you put me in the challenge. Maybe it's meant for the camera. That's why I'm instinctively.
No.
Is she showing up good on the camera?
So if I'm,
You
I'm
can
sure
see
I'm
what they
good.
can see. The very bottom one, PowerPoint presentation. Is that what I'm going for?
You've heard of Missouri weather. It's kind of that way with chairs. If you don't like the chair, just wait.
No, I understand.
The last file.
Yes.
Trying to open something sensitive. Here's
Hey.
pictures of my vacation. Whoops.
There will be one
Yeah.
of my vacation.
This is a different kind of candidate, and it's for Boone County.
That's correct.
Okay.
Becky has a harder campaign at this point. I do not have an opponent.
See,
So, but they still have, 25 days. So
share my screen. Dave Taylor, can you verify for me that you are seeing her presentation at home?
Yes, I see. I
someone.
definitely see it. There it is. Perfect.
Thank you so much.
great. You see the presentation and you see me. That's super. Okay. All right. My name is Melissa. I go by Mel to those that know me. Buchanan, candidate for Boone County Prosecuting Attorney. And are you going to be my multimedia person to click through this?
I
thing?
am.
Okay. Go on ahead. So I'm currently serving as your first assistant prosecuting attorney. And my day-to-day duties are listed out there. I mean, it runs the gambit. I will not be rude and stare at my phone, but it's here because at any given time, a detective could call or there could be some fire that I need to address. Generally, Roger, of course, is my boss. he is the currently the elected prosecutor, but has aspirations to be one of your elected associate judges for Division 11, as you all well know. And that was actually the event that I was at here. I think it was in December. Roger came and spoke with everybody, and I came to meet you all and just support Roger in that endeavor. But while he is the figurehead of our office, also carrying a caseload and generally being the smartest guy that I know, I then do day-to-day administrative duties of managing attorneys, workflows, relationship management with our agency partners. That can be community organizations, it can be schools, it's our law enforcement partners, lab partners, state, federal, you name it, conducting investigations, of course, running court proceedings. I carry a caseload and do trial work myself. Any of the human resource management issues that come up in an office, as we all well know, working with human beings. I am the front line of that. And then the fun thing that I get to do is come out and talk to people in the community, do some teaching with Law Enforcement Training Institute. I do statutory law instruction for the county and our future police officers, where I really hone in on doing a good job. And my background is in initially criminal defense, and I was a public defender. And so kind of beating out the idea that we are just protecting a conviction on the prosecution side, because that's not what we're doing. We are trying to find the truth, right? Like that's what we're trying to do as a criminal prosecutor. We are a society grounded in laws and the rule of law. Nobody, not a prosecutor or a defense attorney or anybody in society, wants a wrongful conviction. And so certainly having a captive audience of future law enforcement officers where I say, oh, no, of course a defendant or a suspect. At that point, you have a reporting party who has said something happened, a criminal offense may have happened. You have a duty to go investigate that. And that means sometimes you're going to find information that doesn't support that person's version of events, which means then maybe we shouldn't bring charges, right? Let's not protect a bad case. Right. So that means there maybe shouldn't be a case. So I would go on to the next slide. Previously, what did I do? How did I get here? So currently I'm serving as your first assistant prosecuting attorney. I was promoted into that role in July of last year. Sue Barizi preceded me, and she was a phenomenal OG female attorney that began practicing in the 1980s. And really, again, one of those, it's Women's Month. And so I've been seeing things on my LinkedIn about women in the law. And she was one of those people that was practicing as a trial attorney. You didn't have great maternity leave, when it was a male dominated profession, when you were not necessarily, there would literally be rules where if you weren't wearing a skirt, walk yourself out of that door because you're not coming into my courtroom. Those are the kind of practice assignments that we forget that women had to practice in. And she was one of those that did that before me. And so I really get to stand on the shoulders of giants as far as that's concerned. So before that, I transitioned back into Boone County as an assistant prosecutor in early 2024. And it's really, I started as a trial attorney, and I went to law school knowing I wanted to be in a courtroom, and then I wanted to be a trial attorney. Because to me, it's like, that's what being an attorney is, of course. And I don't mean to say that our contract brothers or those that do, things in other government officials are not real attorneys, but I kind of take the Clarence Darrow view of practicing the law. The only real attorneys are trial attorneys, and trial attorneys try cases to juries. Snobby though that may be. So I started out as an assistant public defender, and you'll see that at the bottom, and that was here in Columbia, Missouri. And that was in 2015. I was a public defender for 5.5 years here in Columbia, and ran the gambit as far as cases were concerned, right? I took the bar exam, and before I'd even gotten my results back, I was offered a position in our local office here as a law clerk. And I had that 3 weeks where it was like, I'm not bringing it in again. Because if I have to take the walk of shame out, I'm going to do it with my dignity and my coffee cup. And I'll see you in February. But that was not what happened. I passed the bar. I was sworn in Jeff City, and then my boss came in and said, congratulations, here's 150 cases. Welcome to the practice of law. So phenomenal attorneys in the public defender system, phenomenal experience, access to a courtroom in a way that a young attorney is never going to get in any other setting. In the private sector, you can make a lot more money, but that certainly is not what drives me. And it never has. I went to law school knowing that I wanted to work in the public sector. And so that was never, the price tag of higher education gives me heartburn and everybody heartburn, but it was okay. I knew that I was going to have a public servant salary because that's what I wanted to do. I'm about the mission. It's not about the money. And so rewarding, great office here. I transitioned from the public defender system when I wanted to grow my family. I have 2 little girls, and I did the first pregnancy as a trial attorney and tried a case when I was 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant. The Friday, I was 9 months pregnant. And the Friday before I gave birth, I walked into the Fulton Reception Diagnostic Center. It's a prison down in Fulton. I had several clients that were there, and I knew that I was like 3 months, but my colleagues will show up and they will make sure that my cases are appeared on in court, but there won't be a lot of substantive work going on while I'm on maternity leave. I want to get these things done. And so I went in there and I met with my clients on Friday. The corrections officer at the front was laughing. He was like, you stuck a beach ball in here. Like, the security around here is terrible. And then that Monday, I had a baby. And I was also talking to my colleagues as the doctor that Wednesday when they're trying to check me out of the hospital. I'm on the phone with one of my colleagues giving them court notes because I'm like, okay, well, here's what's going to go. And here are the cases that I have on this afternoon. And you're good. You need that. And the doctor walked in and he's standing there, expectant. And I go, right.
Yeah.
My husband was like,
They love
I'm
that.
sorry, she's going to tell me. I don't know. It was like, hey, wait, hold on, I'm almost there. And so that was why I made the transition into the work with City Hall. And that was a phenomenal experience as well. In that role, and you just get to liaise with so many people and you get to represent your community in a different way. And I feel very fortunate to have made those connections. DeCarlin is a wonderful city manager, and we've got a really good group of people there. I, in that role, served lots of different departments, but because of my criminal background, I pretty quickly took over as the legal advisor for the Columbia Police Department. In that role, he did a lot of sunshine work, freedom of information, making sure that we're looking through public records requests and responding to those in a timely manner and legally. And then, of course, working with internal affairs and making sure that police officers are doing their job and they're doing it correctly. Mm-hmm. And then I was also the staff liaison and the investigator for our city's Commission on Human Rights. From that role, I probably, until I was ready to transition back into a courtroom, I would not necessarily have transitioned away from City Hall, but I got a call from the Commissioner of Securities in 2022 because I had a background in the law and I had done some white collar investigation fraud work as an intern in law school with the Department of Justice. And then I don't know if you all remember the Mamtech debacle up in Moberly a decade or so ago. So I worked on that case. So I was recruited to come down, and I worked as a senior enforcement counsel and director of securities enforcement for the state of Missouri. So in that role, you're investigating violations of the Missouri Securities Act, but white collar fraud investigations, financial regulations, Ponzi schemes, and tracking the money to the real criminals, working up these financial fraud investigations, and then referring either to a local prosecutor and or to the SEC, to the Department of Justice, so that you can recoup the money and or put the bad guy in prison. And I will tell you, having worked with indigent, there are certainly in indigent criminal defense or in state criminal prosecution, you'll see very just compelling situations, and people that have found themselves in these horrible situations are very tragic. Those bastards, they deserve to go to federal prison, right? It's like you can steal so much money as a lawyer or an accountant, and you have this fiduciary duty, and you are scamming your countrymen. It's reprehensible, and so it's one of those where you're like, absolutely, I can get behind making an accountant have to sell his
boat,
his boat and his mansion down above the rich one, and then go,
third boat,
as you have to. I make a public servant salary, and your attorney, who I'm talking to in New York City, who was like, what? You want a paper check? I was like, that's right. We ride dinosaurs in Missouri. I want a paper check. So got to do that. Great experience. Know how to work up a solid white collar fraud investigation. And then they transitioned back into our local prosecutor's office. Yes.
A little harder. Maybe. Hang on. Oh, maybe my mouse was there. We go.
And then, so I'm just kind of introducing myself, since I'm an attorney and a Boone County resident, but I did not know that I would be running a political campaign at any point. And so I don't know that people know my background. And I think it's important to know who I am in that way as well. Professionally, here's my education. Was at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Law in that role. I'm very involved. I like to talk. I don't know if you all know that. I talk fast. I get barked at by the court reporters. So please let me know if that becomes a problem. Exactly. Good luck keeping that. Time is money. So I was the moot court board. So you're selected, that's like a board of barristers for UMKC School of Law. I was on the National Fraud Advocacy team, worked with the Innocence Project as a team leader, death penalty litigation clinic, had level 1 pro bono honors. And of course, my agency internships there were with public defender system, where I interned and worked with Ray Legg on the MAMTech securities fraud investigation, U.S. Attorney's Office in Kansas City, Kansas, in the District of Kansas. They're over in and around the Leavenworth area, Wyandotte County. And then the federal public defender for the Western District of Missouri. I went to Columbia College and got a master's degree in criminal justice administration in 2011. And then at University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg, Mule Nation, is where I graduated with my BS in 2007. And then my origin story.
Oh, here we go.
We go all the way back. I'm going to sum up 40 years. I'll be 41 on April 1st. So 40 years in 5 minutes. So 1980, I'm born and raised in Missouri, born at Bothell Hospital in Sedalia, Missouri, home of rails, trails, and ragtime. I am the youngest of my parents' children, and I was the only girl. I have two older brothers. They're just the worst. No, they're great. I mean, you have to have moxie as the only girl and the youngest in the pecking order. It's a difficult row to hoe, and that was my position in the family. My father was a law enforcement officer in Sedalia. His vocation he went out on the road in 1975. Then he ultimately was detective, major case squad, was the chief of police down in Sedalia. He retired from the public sector and entered the private sector in 1982, which is why he was relocated to St. Louis County. He took over as head of security operations for Barnes Jewish Christian Hospital in downtown St. Louis. So while I feel it's a weird mix, because I certainly small town, right? And my oldest brother graduated from Smith Cotton. My mother was a Smith Cotton graduate, and her family's in and around the Pettis County area. And I spent my youth in Pettis County. And then my transition to St. Louis County, I was 8 when I entered 3rd grade there in St. Louis County. And so 8 to 18, elementary school to high school, my formative years were in St. Louis County. But, I still remember being out in a rural area and gravel roads and all the things. So I graduated from high school in 2003. And for those that know anybody from St. Louis, it's very important to know where I graduated high school. And the answer is Pattonville. Pattonville in southern North County. Maryland Heights, Bridgeton area is where I grew up. And then I ultimately ended up leaving St. Louis County, and I went to school in Warrensburg. And when I was younger, I thought that I wanted to live in a big city. I'm going to go to Chicago or New York, or I'll go back to St. Louis. And then that just, as I've gotten older and older, Columbia and Boone County really grows on you once you live here and you make it your home and you become, I'm not a native, although my children are, but I am certainly, I think at this point, a townie in my experience. And so I don't want to live in one of those large megalopolises anymore. And I'm glad that life worked out the way it did, because when I went to Warrensburg, I met my college sweetheart, who is now my husband. And David mentioned that my husband came down here actually, I guess it was a couple months ago. And he had introduced himself and said that he was helping with the campaign, and I think got some information. And so ironically and fun fact, his office is right up there. He's in 409 Vandiver, Building 3, Suite 100. Yeah. They are News Group. They're a local family-run business here, media monitoring analytics. But he is Cooper County, grew up in Booneville, and that's how we ended up back in this area. When we graduated in 2007, we moved here, and then we bought our first home in Boone County in 2008. And then 2015, grinding through those life levels, I graduated into the Great Recession. And so luckily I had a fiance at that point who had a family company, and I started working in the family salt mines. And I worked all day, it switched from the time, because I've always had to work, right? I did not have a silver spoon, and I came from a solidly middle-class family. In my family also, they were loving and supportive, but they're like, oh, you know, you're gonna pay your own way. That's what you got to do in life. Life is hard work. So it's like join the military or pay for it yourself. Those are your options, or student loans. So when I was an undergraduate, I was a bartender and a server at night, and I went to class all day. So I had a full-time caseload of, you know, like 20 hours of classes, and then I would work 35 hours a week as a bartender or a waitress. And then when I went into the professional sector, I was working, you know, that 8 to 5, and then I went to night class, and I would go to night class for 4 hours a week, all week, and earned my graduate degree from Columbia College in 2011. At which time I started applying for law school. Ended up at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and yeah, got the JD in 2015. So married during that period of time too. 2010, Ian and I got married in St. Louis County. And then 2015 to present, I've been practicing law, being a mom and a wife. And you'll see there, mother, wife, lawyer, and middling gardener, which is why at the beginning I had my mint. It just, PowerPoint suggested that. And I was like, yes, I do like that. And I want spring. I'm sick of the gloom and doom that we have going on. And it has no significance or relevance other than I liked it.
Fair.
And then the why, right? So there's my family. So the why am I doing this is very easy for me. This is kind of vintage now. Quinn is my little one. She's in the stroller there. She was probably about a year old. This is 2023. And Belle is my oldest, and then husband Ian. So the why for me is because I want to do my part to give my family and your family the community that we deserve to live in, right? And I told this story at the barbecue, but I think it is worth repeating because it's very close to home for me and something that I can control within my sphere of influence. So my daughter, my oldest daughter, Belle, she attended La Petite École French Immersion School. It starts as a preschool. And so she started at 2 years old. They also have a kindergarten through 5th grade. And we wanted to just kind of cement those foreign language skills. So we let her do kindergarten and 1st grade there. And then we knew we were going to pay for private. We're public school people. We both went to public school. We knew we weren't going to pay for private school all the way through senior year. So we talked about the transition because we're going to transition her at some point. If we keep her here until 5th grade, can you imagine that horrible transition from this small little private school into a big general public middle school? So we wanted to give her enough time to be able to make friends in the public schools. So we transitioned her 2nd grade this year into Russell Boulevard. So she started at Russell and she's clicking along and making friends and seems to be integrated and doing really well. And she came home and did the normal things she asked her kids, how you doing today? What did you do at school? Did you play with? Anything happen? And she said, oh yeah, we had our intruder alert drill today. And I said, huh? Well, we'll get into that. She said, well, you get a friend, you pick a friend, and then you run into the woods and you wait for the police to come. And still thinking about it, like it makes me emotional because it's like, okay, so this is what we're doing. We are teaching elementary school age children to grab a friend and run for your lives and hide in the woods like medieval villagers, hiding from the Vikings, like seriously, and normalizing it to children and normalizing it to ourselves writ large. And it's not normal. And that shouldn't be normal. And that's not the community that I want my children or your children to live in. It's not the community that I think we want to live in. And so I certainly, Bekki will get to go and work at hopefully the General Assembly, and we'll get to talk about some legislation and how we can regulate keeping, I mean, at a basic level, why should juvenile offenders have access to handguns? Why should a juvenile have a handgun that they can then pull out and kill each other with? That makes no sense. And that does not comport with federal law. And we should do what we can to make smart policy decisions. And then where we have offenders that cross that line and break the laws that we have set and agreed upon as a civilized society, we need to enforce those laws. And so from my perspective, I will not, my administration will not make recommendations of probation on offenses that involve a gun, even if that means you're a felon and you were just found possessing a gun. If you are using a gun in an illegal manner, the state of Missouri should not be recommending community supervision for you. UUW, shooting at a vehicle, shooting at a person, illegally possessing a firearm is something that the state should either make no recommendation and you can plead open to the court. And the court, if the court sees fit to grant you probation, that is the court's recommendation. But ultimately, we represent the people, and I think that the people of Boone County want to see better. They want to see shootings in the little downtown, and as the people getting hit by air and bullets stop. And so that will really be a benchmark of our administration. I also want to continue, of course, the work that Roger has done. He has done a phenomenal job of rebuilding a trial office, which is no small task. Being a trial attorney is incredibly demanding, and it takes a particular personality. And right now we have a really good group of people that we have built that will actually try cases, that will stick to their guns, that will revoke offers, and that will put on a really good case to represent the people of Boone County. And so we want to continue that work, build on that work, and do what we can to mitigate gun violence in our community.
Is there another slide after this one?
There may be
Let's find
questions,
out.
I believe. Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead.
And then plug
leave that.
myself.
Let me
Yeah.
leave that for a minute, and
You
then
bet.
we'll let people see your face.
This was what I had at the chili dinner. And at some point there was like, technology issues, and they were working to like do the slides, but it was my slide that got stuck up there during the technology issues. And I was like, look at all that fanfare. And my husband put this together.
I have a question. Just curious if this would fit in your pay rate or not. Once you get a certain age, you're way not you're a long ways off, but some of the rest of us are old enough now. I don't know how many calls a day from Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security scammers.
Oh,
Is
that's the frauds.
right? Is that
Sure.
the sort of thing you're off with your handle, or is that a national thing as well?
So certainly, it all starts whether it is a local prosecutor's office or the state attorney general's office. It starts with law enforcement, and so when you know you've got a scammer waste their time because you're protecting somebody else, but then also, of course, make that report to law enforcement so that they can investigate. The consumer protection agency at the attorney general's office specifically investigates those type of issues that involve consumer fraud actions. If there's some sort of Ponzi scheme or where they're trying to get you to invest in money, that could be a securities violation, which you can report to the Securities Division of the Secretary of State's office, and then local law enforcement as well. We're seeing much more of these, what they call pig butchering scams, which are basically like confidence scams where people think they're talking to an online paramour. They get scammed of all this money. They feed it into a cryptocurrency machine. It goes offshore. And, it's very devastating, of course, the effects of that. So it starts with law enforcement, whether that's state or local.
One question in the chat and one hand raised online. The chat question is probably easy. Who has filed to run against you for prosecutor? Anyone?
No one. At this point, like I said, they have, 25 days. So,
Yeah, there's another month.
but it is I think that it is a position which lends itself to somebody who has experience, certainly within that office. I mean, it seems to make sense.
Right.
And it's a very hard job, I think, as we know. And so I don't know how many people are jumping up to do it, but certainly they could. They have 25 days that they could file.
Does Roger have anyone?
He does not at this point. So
No, I meant before when he was running for that.
he was initially appointed, and then he ran his election. Because there was no competition once he was appointed, and then he was elected.
Yeah.
And so this was his first term, and now he's running for Division 11.
And then Herb has got his hand up. Did you want to? Okay. Herb, go for it.
Thank you very much for speaking to us today. We appreciate it. I'm personally impressed with the diversity of roles and jobs you've held since graduating law school. And I think an argument can be made that diversity is an advantage for a prosecutor in a county like Boone. If you see it the same way, would you outline something about the daily job of the prosecutor, and why that diversity is important?
Sure, I would absolutely agree with you. It was interesting because, of course, my father, having had a law enforcement background, he was more conservative, although he loved me dearly. And he thought I would come back to the Republican Party.
When you grew up
I never did. And so part of that perspective, I think, is knowing that I have these people that I love and they have a different perspective. I really followed what I felt like was my moral compass. And I found very quickly in law school that my people, through internships and then just the best lawyers that I met had been criminal defense attorneys and specifically public defenders. Sean O'Brien was one of my mentors from UMKC School of Law, phenomenal public defender and nationally renowned capital defense attorney. But I think that the experience of being a defense attorney, and particularly an indigent defense attorney, where you're not in it for the money, obviously, you are doing the work of a defense attorney, but unlike a private attorney where it's like you have a client that can pay and is willing to pay, and they might pay you a lot of money. As a public defender, you're doing the work to serve a class of people that need to ensure that their constitutional rights are upheld and that they are getting the same level of representation that somebody who can afford to pay for a private attorney is getting, because that's what the law says they deserve. That experience, I don't think, is an inhibitor, because the role of, if you are a progressive person and a Democrat, a compassionate person, I think our tribe is drawn to the public defense work, and that's wonderful. But you can do so much good and social action as a just and principled and fair prosecutor. And knowing, having the relationships that I have built amongst the bar, but our community at large, and having had that experience as a criminal defense attorney, and particularly public defender, I think I am a better prosecutor. I am more pragmatic. I really look at it as it's not my ego. I'm doing justice. That is what my mission is, and that is a very unique position within the law. On any given day, I am deciding who is being charged with a criminal offense. I'm deciding what criminal offense they are being charged with. I am deciding whether or not I'm recommending to a court of law that a warrant be issued and that they be denied bond, or whether a summons is issued. I am deciding ultimately what a just recommendation is for that person. And there's not a cookie cutter approach to that. Really, every case and every defendant and every person that finds themselves in crisis, because unfortunately, by the time that they get into the public defender system or you see them as a prosecutor, these are people that are in crisis, because that's what a criminal case is. And you need to figure out what is the best, not only, and as a prosecutor, I would say, when you're a public defender, your role as an attorney is to zealously advocate for that individual. You have a client and your duty is to them, and your duty is clear. It's much more, I think, pragmatic. It's much more esoteric as a prosecutor, because I have to consider the defendant as well. I'm considering the accused. I'm considering the people of the state of Missouri and people of Boone County. I'm considering our law enforcement partners in the investigation that they've done. I am considering what is a just outcome for victims of crime and families, potentially of homicide victims. And so there's a lot of thought and duty that goes into what is justice for every individual. And I think you have to be willing to put in the hard work for each case, have that pragmatic view, and be able to set your own ego aside.
Is it okay to take another 5 minutes? We're getting gone over. I know you're both very busy. I wanted to echo what Herb said about your diverse, I would even call Missouri-wide kind of experience and understanding, because I think that's something that Boone County has a responsibility for by now. And I guess, and also the fact that in your personal story, that you're really getting to do the things you always wanted to do, and you still want to do them. So I'm going to ask you about the point you're at now. I think it's a fairly large office with quite a few people working in it. So you've been number 2 in the office for just a while now. But what can you tell us about your abilities to understand the responsibility of being a leader? You've already talked about making the decisions, about deciding. But what about working with the people that you have to work with? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I think that to be an effective leader, I certainly have had a wonderful mentor in Roger. He's been great, and getting to work closely with him and continue his policies, while also kind of thinking about what, if it were my train station, I would want to see and what I would want to do. I think you have to accept buy-in from your people and not be afraid of that. Like I am not an authoritarian person who's going to say it's my way or the highway. I'm going to pull rank and shove things down people's throat, because I just don't think that that is the most effective leadership. I want to hear feedback. I want to be challenged from those that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room or the best trial attorney. I want to be challenged by people that are smart. I want to hear their perspectives, and I want to incorporate those perspectives into what our mission is. Which
Why in
ultimately,
particular?
because I think that that is the best way to serve the people.
You'll have
Boone
hard
County-
cases where
That's
it's not
right.
obvious.
That's right. And sometimes listening, right? Consulting with other attorneys, not thinking you know it best, because that is something that I see with a lot of attorneys. They're like, oh, no, I know. I don't need to consult with people. It's like, you're insane. Nobody, it's like the Matrix. Nobody jumps off the wall the first time, like you're going to fall and and it's okay. Like that's how they call it the practice of law. That's what the practice of law is collaborating with other attorneys and saying, well, I have this thought and I have this perspective. What are your thoughts? What do you think? Am I a sounding board for my own thoughts and my own perspectives, so that I know I'm thinking.
People is it roughly?
So we have a fairly large office. We are the entire fourth floor of the courthouse. So between our investigative staff, our victim response team, support staff, and then the attorneys, we have 50 plus employees.
And a lot of them are attorneys.
Yeah, about 17.
Yeah.
That's right.
Quick question in the chat. Dave says, apologies if you already said this, but would you be the first woman to be Boone County prosecutor if you're elected? Do you know?
Thank you for mentioning it. I would be. I could have gotten a list of all the predecessors that came before me and say, do you notice anything about these? I would be the first female, first but not the last.
Yay. Oh, that's great.
You certainly have let us get to know you better.
And
I think
opportunity.
the way the race is going right now, that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any closing comments?
No, I would just say that I hope your dog gets one of your shirts.
Yes.
That's play well.
My daughters
Taking
love
breaks.
her dog at the park. Like they were over there while everybody was speaking. My youngest particularly, she loves dogs, and she was, pet your dog. Oh, and use your dog's name is
Parker.
Parker.
Yes.
Okay. So
Parker
now
loves that. Yes.
I will know whenever Quinn sees us. So we're learning to ask to pet other people's dogs. So I think she did.
At parades and things, dogs are a big hit.
That's right.
I'm going to do something a little special now and complete a job that